Alright, well that bracket turned out pretty nice overall. I got it where I thought I wanted it, but I ended up with a lot of slack on my throttle cable. So you can see how much extra there. So in theory I need to move it back about 3/4 inch. I don't think that's really possible. So I'm probably going to, my initial thought was maybe I could slot my holes and slide it back a little bit, but this bolt hole is part of the intake, so I don't really have room to move that one. I'd have to slot this bracket, which doesn't really have room. So we may see if we end up having a problem, we may just get another bracket, and we could always cut the bracket and then slide it on itself and re-weld it if we have to. Not really my first choice of action, but might also be able to bend this tab part of it that way. That may help some as well. Of course I can't go too much because then we end up where we're pinching coming out here. If we're pointing up or something, then we're kind of binding as we go back down to the throttle. But we'll play with that. But like I said, overall happy with the way the bracket turned out. I think it looks reasonably factory, and we'll get this thing all the way back together and get this thing running. All right, so I did a little bit of digging in the truck, and I went wide open throttle inside the cab, and I was literally just took all the slack out of the cable. So we're gonna have to do something different on this. This is a spare bracket I have off the second intake. So I'm trying to figure out where exactly and how I would want to do this. But I think the easiest thing at this point is going to be cutting this guy and re-welding it. Because I could refabricate this bracket, but if I have this tab to deal with, I would end up with the bracket somewhere in this ballpark area. Because I can't get too close to the map sensor over there. And then we end up where we're starting to pull not in a straight line this way. And if I cut a section out of this, so this is, well, let me start this way. This is my cruise control cable. I pulled all the slack this direction out of it. You can see I need to move back about approximately an inch or so. So if I took out about a 3/4 inch width cut here at a 45-degree angle, I could also slide the bracket slightly back, which would help give me a little bit more dimension out of it, which would also maybe slightly straighten my cable up this way, ever so slightly. So current plan is we're going to cut and modify this guy. What I'll probably do is cut it and then hold it together with some vice grips and make sure I have my depth right before we do our final welding on it. But turned into a little bit bigger project than I wanted to just for that part of it, but you know, this is how custom things go sometimes. So we'll see if we can get some slack pulled out of this guy. And so that is the weight of the pedal going to wide open throttle basically. So that's the slack of the cable coming out. You can see we got about an inch there as well. Technically I could also just cut and recrimp my cables shorter. I'd prefer not to have to do that, but you know, anything's possible. But we'll see what we end up with here. All right, continuing with the fabrication here, I've got my template cut out of what I have. I got some extra templates here, and what I did was cut at a approximately 60-degree and approximately 45-degree angle, show what those look like. So these are with approximately 1 inch pulled out of them, so you can see how much more overlap we have if we cut at a flatter angle, less steep in relation to our throttle cable line. Now, not only do we have more overlap for welding here, if we stack the brackets vertically, we get a better weld as well. So we could also do something like that, which would give us additional surface area for welding, as well as you know, remove our length that we need to have removed. So might take a little bit more fabrication to get that all adjusted right, but just kind of wanted to show you my thoughts and processes on that. So even the 45 wouldn't be terrible amount of overlap. Probably pretty similar. We get a little bit more on the 60, but we'll see what that looks like. Kind of wanted to mock this up. It's much easier to cut up cardboard and mess it up than it is to cut and re-weld and then cut and re-weld and then cut and re-weld. So always recommend using cardboard if you can, especially if you need help visualizing or playing with angles or anything like that. But we'll get into exactly what this looks like here in just a little bit. All right, so I got the cut bracket installed, and you can see how much slack I really have in these cables. So this is where it was. This is where it was, and you can see how much slack I have. How much we really need to pull out of this thing before we are where we need to be. So we're going to kind of go a little bit to the left, or towards the passenger side, I should say, and then we'll see what that looks like, somewhere about like that. So I'm going to get the bracket off of the cables, and then we'll install the other half of the bracket, and then we can line up on our slot on our cut and then put vice grips on it. Well, it's not exactly what I had in mind, but that will work. Ended up cutting several times and making several adjustments and notching, and so this one's just sitting in here at the moment because I can't get in there with the channel locks in there, or the vice grips. But I do have this one. Apparently, what I thought was my slack, like that, was actually the slack between the gas pedal, and once you take the slack up, then you had to lift the gas pedal up. So I did a wide open throttle test, and then I realized that I had to actually move the bracket even further back than I originally anticipated. But I think we got it in here where we're going to be happy with it. So I'm going to get this thing blown back apart and unbolted, and I'll show you what the bracket looks like. All right, so we got the dude welded up, and we'll do some cleaning up, kind of come back and cut off some of these sharper edges just to make this look a little more factory. Probably do some cleaning up on this front edge as well. And then we'll get this thing painted black and get it installed. All right, and here's the finalized version. Got it all painted up, looking sharp. Stack the two on top of each other and line up the holes, and you can see how far back we really did have to move that cable perch. So a little over an inch, maybe an inch and a half or so. So we'll get this guy fully installed and on to the finishing up the rest of the truck.